All right, so this is where essentially we left off last time. We have our directional light here, and I'm gonna hit F to focus on it twice, F twice, and then I'll just zero this out for a second. You could see as we move this light around, let's make sure we're in object mode here. And I bring this down, I can make it daytime or nighttime. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, you know what, we'll bring it down here, and let's see. So we get a little bit of the light coming through the room. I'll frame it so it's kind of going this way. And then the intensity, I'll take it down a bit. Well, I guess that's okay. So the room is dark. So what I'll do too is let's go ahead and select this pillar, hit F to focus. And we're just going to talk a little bit more about lighting. So I kind of like go in here, I center pivot on these guys, things like that. So let's add a sconce. We're just going to do very basic. Again, we're just, gray boxing to show our art director what's going on. So I'm going to make a cube here. And this will just be a wall sconce that will have like a point light on. And I'll select this face here and I'll hit R. And what I like to do in my scene is, kind of, because it can get pretty crazy here, is make sure that I'm always like, okay, here's my door parents. Let's make sure they're in the environment section. And then these are I went in and I just renamed the inner walls and outside walls because I want to access those later. And what is this cube? It's just a default extra cube. So let's throw these inside of environment as well. And then right click, create an empty game object. And we're just going to call this lighting. And I'm going to make sure this is zeroed out. And I'm going to right click and I'm just going to create a light and I'm going to create a spotlight. And on this spotlight, actually, let me just make sure that let's make sure we're in object mode here. And let's rotate it 90 degrees on X. And I'm just going to place it here. And eventually I'll just make this into a lighting, like a wall prefab. So I'm going to place it just below this light here. And I want it to start to hit the walls. So let's say this is kind of like, it's a dark hallway, so the school would have the lights on. And some ways of adjusting spotlights and stuff, as you can see here, down at the bottom, they have this kind of inner angle and then this outer angle here. And it's kind of hard to get to, but if we look at this little slider here on the shape, you can actually adjust the outer part on that inside part, and then this one adjusts the inner side. So you can move it like this. You can also play with the distance of how you want that to be, right? And the intensity. So here's the intensity. Spot, real time, you could do mixed lighting, which I like to do because I like to bake my lights later. And then for the range, you could pull that in. And you could say, okay, I want to make that much smaller. I'm going to increase the intensity so we're lighting more of the ground. Something like that. And something like this, so that it's really cutting through. And then if you feel like it's too hot against the wall, you can kind of pull it away a little bit. And I generally try to match the shape of the light itself. So if it's coming out like this, I'll grab my, let's put our spotlight here. And I'll just kind of pull it up so that it matches it. So it looks a little bit more natural. So let's go ahead and name this sconce. I'm not sure if that's how you spell it. I could look it up, but just kind of, and then this is a sconce spotlight. And so that's that. And then we have the object here. And then we'll just name this, put that in lighting too. Make this a child of this object and just call this sconce. A lot of times you could do like sconce mesh or something. Something else I want to do is give the impression that these doors are emitting light. So kind of move this a little bit closer here. So that like this is the window of the door. So what we'll do later is we'll do like an emissive map. So that's actually casting light. But for the time being, on our door here, what I can do is I can just right click on lighting and then create a point light. So let's do light here, point light. And I'll name this door underscore point light. And I will go to game object, move to view here. And then I'll just kind of place it in front of the door. Now what I'd like to do to give it a little bit more character is, let's say that the light coming from that door is more of a yellow. Something like this. So that's our point light there for that door. And we'll continue to tweak this, but it's sort of the same way, right? Like if you look at your settings here, you might be like, well, how do I adjust the scale of this point light? Well, out here, there's these little dots, and you could drag them in because we don't want them to affect the whole scene. We just want it to affect this particular area. And I make it both mixed, real time and baked mixed because I like to bake my lights. Now, you're going to hear me say baking a lot, and we'll hopefully cover that in this class. But Bake Light takes all the lighting information and puts it in a texture and like multiplies it on top. And then you could delete your lights and it makes it more performant. So this is kind of what a spotlight does. It looks like a flashlight. A point light is sort of like a light bulb. Now, if you're having a hard time selecting these, notice as I make these bigger or smaller to adjust this range here. So we could do 2.5 if you feel like that's a big size. And then that'll cast a little bit of light against this locker, which will add some visual interest. We also want to really scale this down. And I'm going to bring this down a little bit closer here because this is the primary area of interest. And what we're going to be using is an emissive light for this. So what I might do here is just to kind of, you'll see it here, place it above them. And then I'll go to Tools, Pro Builder window, and I'll make a new shape, which is a cube. And just kind of drag out maybe one. You could create two if you want, depending on, let's see. I'm going to thin this out. Let's center pivot on this, scale it out, and then just kind of, I think it makes better sense if it's two. So we'll do Control D and then select all three of these, and then I'll merge them together. So go to Merge Objects, and it's going to get rid of your vertex lighting, and that's okay. We're going to do some interesting stuff with this and name this ceiling light. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save this. And then, like I said, we'll play with the actual geometry of this, depending on how we need it. Something I forgot to mention is if you're not seeing your lighting in your scene, or if you don't want to see any of this lighting and shadows, you can click this scene lighting button here, and that'll toggle it on and off. So that's kind of a cool feature inside of Unity that you can hide those things as you're working, especially if you have a computer that isn't that performant. Something else that I have down here that I think you might have missed is if you go to Window, or I might have missed to explain, and you go to Rendering and you go to Lighting Explorer, this is kind of a nifty feature that I like to have open, and this allows you to select each light in the scene as you go through, so you can see, and then you can adjust the range, intensity, and indirect lighting through this Light Explorer. So a lot of light artists will have that open as they work. And then you could see it has 2D lights, reflection lights, light probes, static lights, things like that. You can also, in your game view here, or actually, sorry, up here in your scene view, you can click on, I believe is it this last option here? Yeah, you could do wireframe. You could do shaded wireframe, baked lighting, which we haven't covered yet, light overlap, things like that, where lights are overlapping each other. I usually keep it on shaded unless I need to look at my light map in general. Center this light a little bit here. One other thing with this is you can actually turn lights on and off through your Lighting Explorer. So let's go ahead and we're going to keep it pretty simple because this is only like a week-long project. But here's our sconce mesh here. I'm actually going to rename this sconce prefab. I'm going to drag it into my prefabs folder here. And then I just want to select that sconce prefab and hit Control D to duplicate it. And this door point light, I don't know if I want to make this a prefab just yet, so I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate it and move it down here. And the reason why I say that is because it would be part of the bigger door object, and that would be like if you're animating the door, things like that. Stuff you should think about as an asset modeler. So let's actually talk about how we can animate lights in our scene, right? So this is a school. Maybe this light is flickering or something. How can we do that as we play our animation? So let's go ahead and just press play now for now, and just kind of take a look at how this looks as we're walking through our scene. We have a character walking around. We have some really nice lighting going on. So it's adding a lot of atmosphere. We've got this shoulder light on him, and it snaps. And you can see he's got this light. Again, I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe I'll delete it later. This is kind of a work in progress. Let me save my scene. All right, so let's go to Window, Sequence, and then go to Timeline here. And I'm going to drop the timeline on my Lighting Explorer here. And I'm just going to, let's see, select my light here because we'll be using this to animate some of our lighting. And I'm going to create inside of my timeline folder. I believe I created a timeline folder, didn't I? Is it an art? Yeah, timelines. And I'm just going to call this lighting timeline. I'm going to hit save. And now we have a timeline here, and we can control all of our different lights within our scene. And also what I'll do is I'll connect it back to Cinemachine where like if a camera's at a certain angle, we could have a light turn on or off or things like that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and lock this. And then I'm going to hit the plus sign and I'm going to add a track group. And I'm going to name this lighting group here. Now, something you'd use for bigger scenes, and we're just going to use it just to kind of teach you how this works. But I can add a track subgroup here. And this track subgroup, I'm just going to rename this hallway. Now, another reason you might do this is because say one of these rooms is open and you can actually walk into them in the same level, like you're not loading a new scene. So this animation plays, it goes to this character here, and then we cut to being able to control the character and have him run around, right? And then you can have him go in this room. You can create another subgroup that's called classroom or something. All right, so let's right click on our hallway here, and we're going to add an activation track. Now this will activate our light. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab essentially my sconce spotlight here. I'm going to right click again. I'm going to add another activation track here, and I will add my other sconce spotlight here. And so even though they're prefabs, each one of these will act independently. All right, so let's take a look at some kind of basic stuff, right? Let's say we want these lights to turn on as our character is walking, right? So this is our first light, our first activation light, which is, let's see if we can, I'll just move this a little bit out. You can see from the get-go, it's off. And then let's say about 2 seconds in, this other light turns on, right? Just kind of showing you kind of a review of timeline and stuff we could do. So I press play here. You can see as our character walks to about 1 second, that light turns on and this other light turns on here, right? So we could do cool stuff like frame these, so it's like, he hits that light, he gets there, it pops to that light, and they're both on. So it's kind of, again, something that we could do with our timeline. We can also animate it in a specific way where we turn on and off in the lighting properties. We could do it kind of take this, copy it, move our cursor here, paste it again. This is just kind of one way of doing it, sort of like an artificial animation where you can control the length of how long you want each one to be on, opposed to having to actually set keys. Stuff like that, which is kind of cool. Trying to think, we could also let's grab our directional light and just place it under lighting here. So that's part of that same group. And then we could drag this down here and we can add an animation track to this directional light. And what it'll also do is it'll add a animator to that light. So we can hit record here. And as we scrub through, we can say, you know what, at the very beginning, let's kind of rotate this. Let's set its initial position, right? So I'm going to just zero this out for a second and then rotate it 90. And then what I'll do here is just, again, see how it has a dot there? So it already set the key. I can slowly, over time, we can move this light so it slides that way. So as our character's walking to about here, I don't know, we'll say 3 seconds, we have this light kind of animate all the way in like this. So now when we watch our scene, now when we go to build it, the problem with this light is it's not generating lighting on the fly. So that's kind of a problem. So we'll have to go to Window, Rendering, and then let's see. This light actually will make it, let's see, real-time light. I guess we could do mixed on this as well. I forget that that's like our sun. So it's gonna actually, there we go. We have to let it kind of bake out a little bit so you can see that. So it's just kind of like a virtual glitch there a little bit. So something like that. And I think we're at 15 minutes. What we'll look at in the next video is how we can add post-processing to make our lights glow, make it look a little bit cooler in our scene.